Did they simply refuse to go with some things, Bill? Well, we did a few things in the movie that they were unaware of. Stripes has been hailed as one of the most quotable, irreverent comedies of its day for more than 40 years. However, what if we told you that even ardent moviegoers were unaware of a secret aspect of the movie? Only lately did Bill Murray himself confirm it. It's not a backstage feud or a deleted scene. It is woven into the very fabric of the film, right in the middle of it. A small detail that most people would never notice modified the Stripes. You won't view the movie the same way after you've noticed it. What did Murray eventually divulge? To put it mildly, it changes your perspective on the narrative. The version by Cheech and Chong. Viewers envision Harold Ramos's sardonic humor and Bill Murray's irreverent charm leading a group of outcasts through military life when they think of Stripes. However, many fans are unaware that the movie was initially envisioned as a star vehicle for Tommy Chong and Chi-Chi Marin, a completely different combination. Chi-Chi and Chong were at the top of their game at the time. Renowned for their enormously successful stoner comedies that tended toward anarchy encased in smoke, hallucinogenic adventures, and countercultural humor. The wry, cynical military satire that Stripes evolved into was not the original idea. It was intended to be a full-fledged stoner comedy with Army boot camp as an unusual setting. The concept was straightforward and definitely in line with the pair's aesthetic. What would happen if two endearing slackers carrying their disorganized shenanigans with them muddled their way into the military? According to reports, early drafts of the script extensively emphasized this aspect and included bizarre scenes, such as the notorious psychedelic trip in South America. The military scheme was mostly used as a backdrop for ridiculous antics, odd meetings, and outrageous jokes that mirrored the humor of Chi and Chong's upcoming film and Up in Smoke. The movie would have combined the distinctive aesthetic of Cheech and Chong with an organization, the Army, that stood for everything their characters usually made fun of. There was great room for subversion and ridicule. But before the partnership could develop into a full-fledged marriage, something went wrong. Despite the filmmaker's enthusiasm, an insider rumor claims the agent refused to give the script to his clients. As a result, Cheech and Chong never saw it, much less accepted the parts. According to Ivan Reitman and others involved in the production, the agent was requesting more funding or a level of control that the studio was unwilling to give into. The filmmakers could only have one explanation for this. Since Cheech and Chong never viewed the script for review, they were free to come up with ideas for a totally different cast and tone for the movie. The figures were revamped to convey a different kind of rebellious attitude, and the stoner comedy components were pushed to the side. On the other hand, the loss of Cheech and Chong also changed the Stripes that viewers shared. Bill Murray and Harold Ramos, who had their own distinct comedic styles, less substance-inspired craziness, and much more sneaky, anti-authoritarian wit, took up the principal roles once the stars left. Although there are still traces of the original concept, Stripes has become more sophisticated, cutting, and some would argue, ageless. Not only did the faces on television alter as a result of the sudden casting change. When Murray changed the comedy, it made room for a completely different style of humor that would change the movie in unexpected ways. Stripes' distinct comic tone is one of its distinguishing features, a blend of sardonic humor, rebellious appeal, and cunning derision of authority. The talent of Bill Murray's improvisation is largely responsible for this. Given its early connections to Cheech and Chong, Stripes began as a looser, more conventional stoner farce. However, the film became noticeably crisper and more sarcastic once Murray took over the lead. Murray's innate sense of comedy tended toward a more subtle anti-authoritarian humor rather than overt stoner slapstick. His spontaneous comments and ad-libs changed not just his persona, but also the tone of the movie as a whole, making it into a comedy that managed to strike a balance between ridiculousness and a startling amount of nuance. Murray's improvisation was more than just a source of amusement. It changed the way other characters interacted and rewrote important scenes. Many of the moments that fans now consider classic, such as his snide remarks or casual reactions to military leaders, weren't planned that way in the first place. His portrayal of John Winger, a reluctant sardonic everyman trapped in a role he obviously doesn't appreciate, felt genuine due to his innate ability to infuse irreverence into even the most banal lines. His co-stars, especially Harold Ramos, had to adapt on the spot due to this looseness on set, frequently deciding to underplay their own lines to allow Murray's spontaneity to take center stage. Murray's improvisation caused the character's dynamic to change, resulting in a buddy comedy chemistry that felt more natural than intended. The essence of Stripes is this distinct energy, which gives the movie its jumbled yet vibrant tone. Had it not been for Murray's spontaneous, boisterous contributions, the comedy would have been more expansive and less nuanced. Rather, through clever mockery of authority and conformity, it was conveyed through sardonic aids, casual jokes, and sudden bursts of silent defiance. His ability to convey the humor in an inelegant manner made it fantastic, even for sequences that could have otherwise been completely ridiculous. In addition to being funny, it may always be attitudinal. It stood out from other military comedies of its era thanks to this small but crucial distinction, which also appealed to the audience's desire for something more intelligent and subversive. However, a lot of the humorous persona that Murray would use to struggle with his task for the rest of his life was molded out of his improvised technique upon Stripes. This production combined sardonic charm, deftly undermining authority, and striking a balance between hardiness and detachment. It established a benchmark for the subsequent films and permanently altered the way that audiences would perceive him, by demonstrating that comedy could be both sophisticated and loose. The subtly humorous skill of Ramos in Stripes. Harold Ramos provided the crucial balance that kept the movie cohesive, but Bill Murray's improvisational genius and irreverent humor receive a lot of credit. Ramos portrayed the quiet, intelligent schoolteacher Russell Ziske, who enlists in the army more out of friendship than a genuine desire to serve. Murray's wild, chaotic energy was counterbalanced by Ramos's subtle knowledge and composure from the very first moment. Ramos' character responded with logic, compassion, and a quiet fortitude, whereas Murray's persona flourished on upheaval and sardonic humor. The two stars developed a natural chemistry as a result of this dynamic, which turned Stripes from a straightforward military comedy into a heartfelt buddy comedy. The group's misfortunes were emotionally grounded in Ramos' character. Ziske was the one who kept the plot grounded in reality in a movie full of comedic moments and exaggerated characters. It was more than just mutual mischief that made him devoted to Winger Murray. It demonstrated sincere camaraderie and accountability. Ziske served as the movie's moral compass, whether he was assisting wingers in planning their path through basic training or supporting them when they were unsure. By reminding viewers that underlying the mayhem was a link that gave the drama emotional weight, his consistent presence calmed both the audience and the characters. The best thing about Ramos's performance is that he is able to build scenarios without overpowering the flashy antics going on around him. He never tried to party with Murray's friends or compete for laughs, he matched it instead. His responses, which were frequently nuanced looks, precisely timed pauses, or a single well-chosen remark, deepened the humor without lessening it. He gave the scenes breathing room for the humor rather than attempting to steal them. Ramos's method demonstrated an innate understanding of rhythm and tone, allowing him to be both required and supportive in establishing the film's humor. In the end, Ramos established the marker of Stripes as a new standard for the considerate sidekick in buddy comedy. It was possible to achieve complexity and emotional resonance without having to be either foil or straight man at large. Without Ramos's understated genius, his Ziske permanently altered the audience's expectations of this interaction, reverberating through movie after movie. There wouldn't have been the elegance, poise, and classic appeal that Stripes has preserved for so many years. The wasted chance at Eastwood. Bill Murray was at a turning point in his career following Stripes' triumph. He was now more than just a sketch comedy celebrity thanks to the movie. With his unquestionable appeal and ability to combine humor and sincerity, he was now a bankable leading man. Offers quickly poured in, one of which came from none other than Clint Eastwood. Murray claimed that Eastwood had approached him about starring in what was not just another light military romp but rather a major Navy-themed action comedy set against the backdrop of World War II. It was intended to be a huge-scale production with plenty of room for humor and action, as well as large set pieces and naval battles. The opportunity to work with Eastwood, who was already a Hollywood legend, would have marked a dramatic shift in Murray's professional path. However, having recently left Stripes, which primarily emphasized military themes, Murray was currently cautious about being pigeonholed. He was afraid that if he played another uniformed part, audiences and studios would see him as the military comedy person. That was a risk he was unwilling to accept as a performer who valued diversity and artistic freedom. Back-to-back military comedies felt restrictive to Murray, whose comedic instincts thrived on unpredictable and subversive expectations. Murray declined the offer, despite the opportunity for a high-profile, large-scale production and the prestige that would have come with working with Eastwood. At the time, it seemed like the best course of action to avoid being restricted to a particular kind of role. Murray has acknowledged in recent years that this is one of the few career decisions he truly regrets. He has conducted interviews. He considers the opportunities that may have presented themselves for him had he accepted Eastwood's offer in a few frank radio and print interviews. This lost opportunity included not only the chance to play the lead in a potentially hugely successful movie, but also the chance to collaborate with one of the biggest names in the film industry and develop a new aspect of his acting career. Murray has always drawn toward parts that allow him to do more than just make people laugh, even though his comedic genius is what makes him most famous. A partnership with Eastwood would have provided a twist on that action-drama-comedy combination that may have given a career already rich in color even another shade. The Eastwood project was envisioned as a major undertaking, one of the most intriguing what-ifs in Hollywood history. The scenario would be a huge naval World War II epic. One can only speculate about how Murray's filmography would have changed and what the military comedy trajectory might have been if he had accepted the job. Rather, Murray proceeded on his erratic course toward increasingly unusual, reflective material. The partnership with Lost Eastwood would never be forgotten. Stripes' unexpected military backing. The degree to which the U.S. military funded Stripes' creation is among its most unexpected features. The film benefited from unparalleled access to actual military resources, even though it is a comedy that parodies Army life and authority. The production received trucks, equipment, and even the use of Fort Knox as a main filming location from the U.S. Army. This degree of collaboration is uncommon, especially for a film that isn't a simple patriotic or pro-military production. However, to add credibility to the boot camp scenes and action set pieces, the producers were able to use actual tanks, helicopters, and training grounds. As a result, the comedy felt and looked much more real than it would have if it had only used fake props or studio backlots. The fact that military commanders appeared to misinterpret the film's goals is what made this collaboration so noteworthy. Accounts from people who worked on the project indicate that the Army thought Stripes could be a useful recruitment tool. They viewed the film as a hilarious yet light-hearted portrayal of Army life that yet presented military duty in a positive light. The provocative, irreverent, and satirical digs at authority people were either ignored or written off as harmless fun. In a way, the Army misjudged how spectators would react to the humor in the movie. Or maybe they were just looking for any exposure to pop culture that could draw in fresh recruits in the post-Vietnam era. The most memorable parts of the movie had an unexpected authenticity brought about by Fort Knox and actual soldiers. From the training montages to the action conclusion, Stripes had a texture that many military comedies didn't have. The sequences that featured rows of tanks rolling across the landscape or soldiers being drilled on actual bases were so realistic that they stood in stark contrast to the ridiculousness of the foreground action. Because the jokes were set in settings that the audience might identify as really military rather than overblown or cartoonish depictions of Army life, this real-world grounding made the jokes more difficult to land. In retrospect, audiences and those who worked on the movie would not miss the irony of Stripes receiving so much assistance from the military, which it so affectionately parodies. Many of the finest jokes in the movie were actually made by the same organization that ends up being the target of so many of them. Without the Army's support, Stripes would not have had the same visual effect, let alone the same cultural relevance. It's an interesting example of how the very mechanisms that satire is meant to criticize may occasionally support it. However, what transpired behind the camera was equally memorable and unusual: meltdowns, chaos, and friendship. Like the movie itself, the production of Stripes was chaotic and unpredictable, due in significant part to the humorous instincts of Bill Murray and Harold Ramos. The production was formed from the start by continuous improvisation and unscripted events. As actors experimented with phrases and actions in real time, scenes often deviated from the script, which was more of a flexible framework than a strict rule. The film's attractiveness was enhanced by this free-flowing approach, but it also presented serious difficulties on site. Directors and crew frequently had to make last-minute adjustments, such as repositioning cameras, reconsidering blocking, and making room for fresh jokes that sprang up out of nowhere. Although the footage appeared effortless and natural on film, it took a great deal of patience and adaptability from all those involved behind the scenes. Maintaining the actors' and crew's focus during takes was one of the biggest challenges during filming. There were so many spontaneous jokes, unexpected facial expressions, and humorous timing that it was almost difficult for some situations to go through without constant laughter. Even seasoned actors found it difficult to remain in character when Murray or Ramos made a particularly unexpected or well-timed statement, and the crew frequently found themselves suppressing giggles behind the camera. Off-camera laughter disrupted multiple takes, and because no one could maintain a straight face, shooting days occasionally dragged on for hours. Although frequent interruptions hindered the production, they also added to the film's contagious spirit. In addition to creating problems for the creative minds on the set, the pandemonium also led to dissatisfaction among studio officials. These could be the causes of these tremors. From their perspective, Stripes was a risky project, a military comedy that collaborates with the U.S. Army while satirizing authority. Studio executives were concerned that the humor in the movie would upset the military and any potential collaboration on the picture or its final response. Tensions between the executive powers and the creative powers started to emerge as scenarios grew more irreverent and nights of unplanned moments accumulated. Reitman skillfully navigated a way around these possible minefields as a craftsman and diplomat in equal measure, putting a lot of effort into keeping the cast and studio executives somewhat amicable. Huge, powerful connections that endured beyond the production periods arose under the strains and uncertainty. Friendships that lasted long after the dust settled were forged during lengthy funeral days spent laughing over endless ideas. Overall, Stripes evolved beyond a movie due to studio issues, delays, and disappointments. Under Stripes scenes you never saw, it proved to be a testimonial to the strength of their partnership. Although Stripes gained popularity for its unrestrained, rebellious humor, many viewers are unaware of how the movie would have felt differently if a few key moments hadn't been removed. A significant subplot that examined a more somber, emotionally complex romance between Stella P.J. Soles and John Winger. Bill Murray was one of the most conspicuous absences. Their relationship feels flirty and light in the final cut, with only a few standout comic moments. However, their relationship was allowed more time to grow in the original video, which showed Winger's softer, more vulnerable side. This romance journey may have given Murray's character more nuance by revealing that underlying his sardonic exterior and defiance lay a need for stability and connection. In addition to the pared-down romance, the film featured several introspective scenes that examined Winger's disenchantment and Anouilh's aimless life. These more intimate interactions revealed his motivations for enlisting in the army, as well as his struggles with uncertainty and failure. By removing these scenes, the directors avoided character analysis, which would have slowed the film's already rapid pacing, and instead decided to preserve the comedy. Although the audience may have gained a deeper comprehension of Winger's intentions from these moments, their removal preserved Stripes' catchy cadence. The trippy South America sequence would have to be the most extreme removal. Once an extended detour, the characters wound up in a bizarre jungle misadventure complete with bizarre meetings and hallucinogenic images.
The scene was still there from the original versions of the movie, which had intended Stripes to be a stoner comedy for Cheech and Chong. The tighter, more grounded tone that Murray and director Ivan Reitman had established during production was obviously at contrast with this sequence by the time the final edit was assembled. Therefore, the South American cut helped to make Stripes more than just another counterculture romp while also streamlining the plot. These removals tipped the scales even more in favor of a quick and humorous beat that was sure to win over the audience. By placing Stripes firmly in the realm of fast-paced humor and away from reflective surrealism, they were able to connect with the largest possible audience and solidify its status as one of the most beloved comedies of the previous century. However, if those deleted sections had stayed, it would be entertaining to speculate about what Stripes could have looked like in a more complex, possibly even stranger, but unquestionably different shape. How has Murray's journey been altered by Stripes? When Bill Murray went from being an ensemble performer to a legitimate leading man, the movie Stripes was a turning point in his career. Prior to Stripes, Murray had been well known on Saturday Night Live and in ensemble-driven comedies such as Caddyshack, where his talent was displayed alongside other powerful individuals. By placing Murray at the heart of the narrative, Stripes allowed him to establish the mood of the movie and guide viewers through its plot. The rebellious core of the film was his character, John Winger. Additionally, Murray's performance demonstrated that he has the depth, timing, and charm necessary to carry a movie. This achievement demonstrated that Murray was more than just a scene stealer, which helped change attitudes in Hollywood. He might be the star of a big-budget comedy show and make people laugh and feel something. Stripes would turn out to be both critically and economically successful, allowing Bill Murray to work on projects that would be seen as more serious or art films, at least for someone with a history in sketch comedy. Murray started to seek beyond parts that relied on slapstick or caustic one-liners because he had considerable box office power at this point. After absorbing the self-assurance that Stripes gave him, Murray started taking on parts in more intricate, reflective movies that combined humor with pause. Shortly after Stripes, Murray tried to combine comedic elements with emotional depth in indie films like The Razor's Edge. Although The Razor's Edge did not do well when it was first released, Murray's desire to go above and beyond was the driving force behind that decision. In terms of character, Murray's percussion work was quite humaning. Murray brought irreverent and anti-authoritarian comedy to John Winger's character, which are balanced by unexpected bursts of extraordinary emotion. In a number of subsequent films, including Ghostbusters and Scrooged, Murray would adopt an overtly sardonic persona while balancing it with an internal theme of introspection and personal development. The template was expertly created in Stripes, where the balancer is a formidable and rather complex threat who looks around for a greater purpose in life. One characteristic that set Murray apart from many of his contemporaries was the undertone of comedy that had an inner truth that audiences picked up on. Murray is also one of the very few performers who are positioned in the nexus of arthouse cinema and commercial fare by Stripes at this time. To put it briefly, Stripes had made a name for himself as the kind of actor who could give the more nuanced messages that the ore-minded directors were looking for, while yet having the kind of commercial appeal to fill seats in high-budget comedy. This counterweight, which balanced out the big hits with more character-driven work, truly came to define Murray's latter career. Stripes defied convention and humor. When Stripes first came out in theaters in 1981, it appeared to be just another military comedy about misfits who stumble through boot camp. Despite its slapstick and sardonic humor, the movie subtly questioned several of the genre's well-worn cliches. Stripes focused on a group of hesitant, weak guys who were uninterested in discipline or bravery, in contrast to previous military comedies that frequently exalted army life or depicted recruits as future heroes. John Winger, played by Bill Murray, wasn't enlisting in the army out of duty or patriotism. He was broke, aimless, and looking for something to make his life more exciting. Nor were the soldiers in his immediate vicinity heroic figures. They were misfits who found inventive methods to avoid accountability, struggled with authority, and failed drills. Stripes deviated from the typical redemptive or joyous military narratives with this decision. The movie prioritized camaraderie, loyalty, and the straightforward objective of surviving boot camp without losing one's identity over macho heroics. Neither medals nor glory were the motivations of the protagonists. They shared a sense of estrangement and were merely attempting to maintain their sanity while navigating the ridiculousness of army life. Because Stripes prioritized human connection over traditional military bravery, viewers were able to identify with these imperfect, humorous soldiers. Stripes also deviated from the norm in the areas of slapstick and clever satire. Prior to Stripes, the majority of military comedy relied mostly on one-dimensional caricatures of drill sergeants and privates or on fabricated broad gags. There were of course plenty of pratfalls and the odd laugh-out-loud moment in Stripes, but there was also enough dry satire to surround them with layers of bureaucracy, uniformity, and the ridiculousness of institutional power. There was more to the humor than a yelling battle or some pratfalls. It was in their sardonic responses to the absurdity all around them. Part of what made the movie a multi-level experience for viewers seeking belly laughs and astute critique was the way it balanced the absurd with the witty. Additionally, Stripes subtly deviated from the norm of buddy and military humor. It demonstrated that intelligent and foolish, sincere and disrespectful could coexist. Its characters weren't merely cowards or heroes. They were human, humorous, and flawed. This strategy pushed subsequent comedies to transcend strict genre classifications. It allowed for a more liberated and sophisticated form of humor. Not only did that silent rule-breaking influence the movie, it influenced a whole generation of subsequent comedies. The irreverent comedy, memorable one-liners, and the charisma of its characters are the main reasons why lovers of the heritage rarely talk about Stripes. However, few fans ever talk about how the movie subtly contributed to creating the buddy comedy model that would rule the 1980s. Prior to Stripes, buddy comedies typically followed stricter conventions in which the straight man was the obvious one and the comedian was the obvious one. The relationship between Harold Ramos' Russell Zisky and Bill Murray's John Winger was far more organic and well-balanced in Stripes. Both characters added to the story's humor and emotional core, forming a partnership based on true friendship rather than artificial opposition. This more genuine friend dynamic served as a foundation for subsequent movies. From Ghostbusters to Lethal Weapon, friendship and humor were as crucial as storyline and visual effects. Stripes' distinct fusion of earnestness and rebellion was another thing that made it stand out and inspired several subsequent comedy. The movie did more than just make fun of authority for cheesy laughs. It provided a representation of individuals who sought purpose and affiliation but defied social norms. Both viewers and filmmakers were moved by this harmony of heart and defiance. This tone was later adopted by workplace comedies like Office Space and military comedies like Police Academy, which depicted groups of underdogs navigating systems that attempted to stifle uniqueness. Stripes demonstrated that humor didn't have to forgo emotional nuance in order to be successful, and that comedy could be both rebellious and endearing. In fact, Stripes has a way of igniting a wave of budding filmmakers and authors who wish to incorporate sentimentality and satire into their own popular productions. Similar to how the movie's popularity shown that viewers are hungry for stories that parody institutions while also including likable people. The way it strikes a balance between scathing criticism of military life and the genuine experiences of its outcast heroes sets the bar for later filmmakers to follow. It's difficult to think if movies like Groundhog Day and Ferris Bueller's Day Off could have managed to blend honest introspection with clever mockery without Stripes. Stripes left a lasting impression despite being overshadowed by the more flamboyant comedies of the day. Its influence may still be seen in workplace satires, buddy movies, and ensemble comedies. It demonstrated that comedy could simultaneously be intelligent, kind, rebellious, and humane. It was more than simply quotations and slapstick. Please hit the like button and share your opinions in the comments if this opened your eyes to Stripes in a new perspective. What haven't you noticed yet? Remember to touch the bell to ensure you never miss what comes next, and subscribe for more undiscovered stories behind your favorite movies. Click the video on your screen right now if you're ready for more. You won't want to miss it. We assure you.